All right, we'll go ahead and get started if that's okay with everyone. Again, sorry for the technical difficulties. Thank you all for hanging in there and following the next link that was sent out. I'm gonna turn it over to Amy Mangold, President at United Way of Southwestern Indiana. She's gonna introduce our guest today. I think we've got a really great discussion planned for all of you. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat as we go along. I'm sure our guests are going to prompt you to do that as well. But yeah, just appreciate everyone logging on and being patient. And we are recording this, so we'll be pushing out to other audiences for folks that either didn't get the updated link or weren't able to make it this afternoon. But again, appreciate you being here this afternoon. So Amy, I'll turn it over.
Well, I'll echo Tyler. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon, and we're really very appreciative of our guest presenters today. We've got an awesome team from the National United for Alice team. Dr. Ashley Anglin is the Director of Research and Strategic Analysis, and we have Max Holdsworth, who is a research associate with United for Alice. They are out of the United Way of Northern New Jersey. So they have a lot of wonderful information to share with us. And again, as Tyler mentioned, we'd love for you to put questions in the chat. If you want to raise your hand, we'll open up your mics in order to ask questions as they are presenting. So very excited about this information that they have for us today. And as Tyler mentioned, we'll record this, and we'd love for you to push this out within your network, because as part of our upward mobility focus area, we also want to educate people about some of the challenges for individuals who are living in poverty and also struggling working families. And this is one of our ways to help people become more educated about the issues within our region. So I will turn it over to Dr. Anglin or Ashley. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Great. Thanks so much for the invitation. It's awesome to be here with all of you. These are the kind of collaborative partnerships and efforts that we love to see and we love to be connected to. So this is a really great opportunity for us too. And we hope it can be a continuing relationship.
Alice stands for...
and to hear also what you, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Yeah, so it'll also, we hope it can be an ongoing relationship to and learning what people are doing with the data. We love to have that feedback of how it's being used, the impact that you're having, and it seems like you have such a terrific group here, really poised for impact. So we're looking forward to sharing this with you, but also hearing your questions and learning more from you. So yeah, my name is Ashley Anglin. As was mentioned, I'm the Director of Research and Strategic Analysis. And so we work to put together data across the country, but also work deeply in our partner states as well. And so we're going to take you through some of the work that we do, including a little bit more information about United for Alice and our partners, learning who is Alice, what does that mean, and the challenges that Alice faces. We'll talk about our methodology and some of our basic measures, including the Alice Household Survival Budget, which looks at that cost of basics in every county in the U.S. Max is going to take us through some data on the EVB region and some of the aspirational cities and counties that have been shared, and looking what that looks like, as well as some data on the labor landscape. And then I'll take you through some of our newest tools, including our Alice Economic Viability Dashboard, and show you where you can find some of this data on your own. Really, our website and all the interactive tools there is the best way, I think, to get to know this work, because you can kind of dig into it, ask your own questions, and kind of slice and dice the data to answer the questions that you might have about financial hardship in your communities. We'll share a couple updates about initiatives that we're working on. And we will have some time for Q&A at the chat or Q&A at the end, but please use the chat in the meantime. As was mentioned, you can also feel free to raise your hand. We want to make sure that you can get all your questions answered today as well as you can. So we'll get started. So United for Alice is a national research project, but we were founded and are powered by United Way of Northern New Jersey. And this work is brought to Indiana by Indiana United Ways across the state and by the state association. And so we have this really great partnership model. You can see on this map here, all of our current partner states. We have 29 published out states, and I think we're up to 31 in terms of new member states. So it's a growing movement, but it started in one county in northern New Jersey. And it was really born from the realization that official measures of poverty or hardship just weren't capturing the actual needs on the ground. And so in Morris County, New Jersey, where it started, it's a relatively affluent county, but all of the social service agencies, United Ways, nonprofits were saying, we're seeing all this need. People are coming to us, they need food, they need housing, they need shelter, they have emergencies, their car broke down and they can't get to their work. But that doesn't match what we're seeing with a very, very low poverty rate. Something's missing. And so this methodology was developed to help calculate those basic costs and then see and estimate how many households are not able to afford that basic budget to get a better and more full comprehensive understanding of what financial hardship looks like. So we have data for over 3,000, all counties in the US. But those partnerships are really key for us because that's where we can really convene and advocate together and innovate to come up with solutions that can help address the challenges that ALICE households face in their and so that is really our kind of our guiding mission. So who is ALICE? So technically ALICE is a acronym for Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed, and it categorizes those households or individuals that have income above the federal poverty level, but below that basic cost of their in the counties where they live, that are based on that household survival budget, which I'll take you through. We know that ALICE's households are working, often in multiple jobs, very often in essential jobs. A lot of the jobs and occupations that were really heralded as heroes during the pandemic, but those are the jobs that really keep our economy running on a day-to-day basis in times of crisis and not. But regardless, of what's going on in the larger economy, these households often have little or no savings. For emergencies or for future investments, like home ownership or further education. And so that puts them in a really vulnerable place when it comes to crisis. And we know sometimes that crisis is a global pandemic, or it might be someone's car breaking down and or not being able to afford the medication that they need and the food they need to feed their family. So those are those personal crises that ALICE is facing every day. Some of the challenges are really that, like I mentioned, that this extent of hardship is concealed by the outdated federal poverty level. So generally we see, 5 to 15% of households in any given area that are in poverty, but usually another, 20 to 40% ALICE, and nationally, and we'll talk about in your area too, but nationally 41% of households are below the ALICE threshold, ALICE and poverty together. That's a huge portion of our country. And this really is an important point for us because we really see it as a systemic issue that we all need to be working to address together. It's not, when you have 41% of households struggling, it's not individual decisions that are making those differences. And so we all really need to focus on kind of those bigger things that kind of help or hinder folks in our communities. We know that wages aren't keeping up with the cost of basics, and costs are on the rise. And that's especially true for things like food and housing. It's probably not a surprise to anybody on this call that those costs are rising. We all see it and we feel it. And for people that are have lower fixed incomes, that impact can be even greater. And so we see with our ALICE Essentials Index, which measures just the increase in the cost of basics, that the cost of basics are rising faster than just overall goods and services that we talk about when we think about inflation. And so for ALICE, who's only buying the basics, inflation hits harder. And despite these challenges, including elevated anxiety and depression, ALICE households are often earning too much for traditional public assistance. So things like SNAP or WIC or TANF or other types of community supports that are often based on the federal poverty level or sometimes multiples of the federal poverty level. They're still missing a big chunk of households that are not able to get help from those programs, but still have need. And so a lot of this work is looking at that gap in that need and what's being provided through our public assistance. In terms of kind of how we do this work and what we do in terms of our main calculations, you can see those here. I've mentioned these too. So we have our household survival budget. And on the next slide, I'll talk you through kind of the sources for that. And so that's that bare minimum cost of basic necessities. We use that to calculate then ALICE thresholds, which is that average income needed to afford the budget. And that's done at a county by county basis. And when we talk about households below the ALICE threshold, we include Alice and poverty level households combined. So those are the total households that are unable to afford that basic budget. If you'd like to learn more about the methodology and some of our other measures, unitedforalice.org/methodology. Maybe Max, you want to put that in the chat for them too. So if anyone wants to dig into more details, but I will talk a little bit more about the budget because that is something that we do get a lot of questions about and is really a key piece of how we understand Alice in our communities. So as I mentioned, the household survival budget, it's that minimum cost to live and work in the modern economy. This is not an aspirational or cushy budget. It is really meant to be kind of the lowest estimate because even with this conservative estimate, we're still seeing, again, 41% of households struggling. So we want to make sure that we're not being seen as overstating, but it's a really important budget because it's something that is standardized across the country. We have, like I mentioned, we have this data for every county. And so we can really start to compare some of these things and look how that cost of living really varies place to place. And that variation in cost of living, as I mentioned, is not captured by the federal poverty level. It's the same everywhere except for Alaska and Hawaii. And if you've ever, everyone knows that that's cost of living varies, right? I grew up in rural Georgia. Then I moved to Hawaii. As you can imagine, my costs were very different, right? So there's a lot of different variation in this budget. But housing is looking at fair market rent. And that's that we get from a couple different places. But we also look at utilities and we look at, so that's from the housing, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And we adjust that based on household size. You get different household combinations, you get different housing costs. And that's another really important feature of our work is that not only is the budget based on location, it's also varies by household composition. For childcare, we look at the cost for licensed family childcare homes. We get that data state by state. And because of that, we have the largest and most comprehensive childcare costs database. Big thanks to Max and others on our team, but compiling that is definitely a big challenge and something that's really key to this work. For food, we're looking at the Thrifty Food Plan from the U.S. Department of Agriculture with some county variation from Feeding America. And that's a really important piece, and that is adjusted to by your household composition. For transportation, if there is viable public transportation, we include those costs. But for most places, it's looking at the operating cost of a car. So that's based on your average daily miles, by age, cost per mile, license fees, insurance, and all of those key things that it takes to run a car and to have that. Technology, we're looking at a smartphone plan, and that's one that is always talked about whether or not we should expand that and home internet and things like that. Right now, we're looking at that household cost for a smartphone plan for adults in the household. But we did up the amount of gigs for that plan during the pandemic because that became more essential and a lot of people were using their smartphones for hotspots for work and school and things like that. Healthcare is based on health insurance premiums based on employer-sponsored health plans, plus out-of-pocket costs, weighted with a poor health multiplier, as we find that lower-income households tend to be more likely to be in fair or poor health. And so that's an important piece. And we also calculate what we call our senior survival budget, where we have some variation in healthcare, transportation, food, et cetera. So the senior budget is looking at Medicare Part A and B and out-of-pocket costs, plus some out-of-pocket spending on the top 5 chronic diseases as reported by the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services. And then taxes, those are federal, state, and local taxes, as well as tax credits. And one thing I want to point out is the data we'll be sharing is 2021 data. It is the latest data. We're waiting for 2022 to come out, hopefully at the end of this year, and we'll be doing an update next year. But what we want to point out around taxes is that 2021 was a unique year when we saw a really major expansion of the child tax credit and the child independent tax credits, as well as the economic impact payments. And so there were, for the first time, these kind of really big sweeping assistance programs that Alice was eligible for. And so we saw that making quite a big difference. We think it really kind of, for the most part, kind of helped keep things kind of steady through the pandemic, is even though we know everything else wasn't steady, but we know that those programs have the expansions of those tax credits have gone back to pre-pandemic levels. And so a part of our reports and looking at this is kind of the warning signs that are on the horizon, in terms of we think things are getting worse a little bit when it comes to this financial hardship without those supports in place. And so we'll see more next year about where that comes out. But there's definitely some warning signs that we see and that we've highlighted in the Alice in the Cross Currents report. And then miscellaneous, those are cost overruns that are estimated at 10% of the budget. So I'm going to pause. I saw there was something in the chat. Was there a question? Oh, it was just you put in our methodology. Okay, great. Yeah. So before we talk about some of the data, specifics for your area, and we're going to talk a little bit about kind of Indiana specifically, the EVP counties in Indiana. There's a little our footprint's a little different, and then we also have some aspirational cities, and so we'll talk about those. But is there any questions about who we are, the budget, or the basics of Alice before we go on? All right, well then I'm going to pass it over to Max to take us through some of the data, and yes, feel free to jump in the chat or otherwise as we go through. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. And so hi, everyone. As Ashley said, we create these household survival budgets at the county level. So right here on this slide is how those costs vary across the state of Indiana. And so that's how the map is colored. So the costs for a family of 4 are ranging from $53,028 in Washington County to $76,608 in Hamilton County, and the family of 4 being 2 adults, 1 infant, and 1 preschooler. Our website has some more family compositions, and in fact, an ability to choose your composition, but this is the one we present here. So from 2019 to 2021, those costs increased. And as Ashley said, we all know that, we've all felt it, and the news has been talking about it. So 13% we saw for the household survival budget for a single adult, costs increased by 13%, 11% for a single senior, and then 7% for a family of 4. Across Indiana. And yes, the note here, the asterisk, is just that our partner, Indiana, is one of our partner states. So we're able to show the part of your region, Posey, Vanderburgh, Gibson, and Warwick counties here. So when we just say have this region posted, we are talking about these counties. Kentucky, not being a partner state, doesn't have a public budget, and the other demographics that I'll show you. So just keep that in mind, that these are combined of those 4 counties. So this is the household survival budget here. And so we can see that housing is usually one of the largest expenses that families have, especially for families without children. Families with children have a big expense on childcare, and food costs also increase a lot. So as I showed in the map before, for those 4 Indiana counties, if you wanted to look, you would go to the column that's 2 adults, 2 in childcare. Starts with rent being $612, and then utilities $292, and totaling all those together, even though these are all coming from the sources that are in that link, so totaling $59,148 for the year. And the gray bar that has tax credits is during the pandemic, there was a lot of pandemic assistance throughout the nation. So families, particularly with children, received greater tax credits than they had before. So child tax credit being one, and child dependent care tax credit having expanded. And so the name of our most recent report is called Alice in the Cross Currents. So because of those competing forces of pandemic assistance, but also inflation. And so in the 4-county region, we see that number of households below the Alice threshold increased from that 42,920 to 46,777. And so that 46,000 was 37% of households in the region. So 37% of households were below the Alice threshold, were either in poverty or were Alice not making those amounts for the household survival budget. And the chart I showed before, yes, they were all monthly costs until the bottom that has an annual total and then the hourly wage, but most of them are for month. There you go, thanks. So yes, we saw an increase in below the Alice threshold for pretty much the whole country because of all of those pandemic disruptions to our economy, to pretty much everything. And so the pattern we noticed is that poverty went down. In the next slide, if you'll, poverty, you can see poverty households actually fell. The number of households in poverty over time from 2019. In fact, it looks like from 2016 has been going down in the region. So if we were to just look at the federal poverty level as an indicator of the economy for your region, we would think things are getting better. And in fact, our data shows that Alice is growing from that point, from 2016 is growing to a big jump from 2019 to 2021. So in total, 11% of households were in poverty, 26% were Alice, that combining to the 37% in the region. So we also know that there's big differences in demographic groups. That 37% is true for the entire population, but if we dig in and we begin to think about who we want to serve, who we need to serve, we see that there are disparities within racial groups, within ages, and within different family structures. So in the region, we see that the highest percent of hardship occurs, is affecting Black families and Hispanic families more than it is white families and Asian families. And these are still high numbers. Nothing is zero here, but the disparities are still notable. The same thing happens by age, which is that usually throughout the country, and your region is no different, is that the youngest families and the oldest families, the senior families, are in most financial hardship. And compared to those in their prime working years. So the senior families having 53% of those families below the Alice threshold, and households led by someone aged 25 to 44, 28% being below the Alice threshold. Now, I think the biggest difference comes out here, which is in the family structure. So from the American Community Survey, which, if I didn't say, is the source of all of this data, is the family structure. So we're able to see people with children, single parents, if it's female-led, if it's male-led, and married parent households. So the highest rate of hardship falls really on those single parent families, and especially female led. 70% of those female single parent households were below the ALICE threshold. And then when there was two income earners, the possibility of two income earners, a married parent family, there were 9% of households below the ALICE threshold. So a really vast difference there. So by county, this is just a breakout of those county levels here. We can include Henderson, since this is just the percent below the ALICE threshold, which is something that we do have for all counties across the US. So looking like it's really varying across the region, from Warwick County having 28% of households below the ALICE threshold, and then Henderson County, Kentucky, at 43% below the ALICE threshold. So just a more specific look at the region and how financial hardship differs geographically.
Yeah, and I'll show you on the website too. We do have sub-county data that's available for partner states. That's what that note is here. So, within Posey County, we can go down and lower into, census subdivisions or census designated places, zip code. So I'll show you that too. But I wanted to highlight that we have some additional geographic diversity as well.
Yeah, thanks. And this chart gets kind of into that. So with we know that you have what you call aspirational cities, I think is your term. So that those being Grand Rapids, Green Bay, and Greenville, South Carolina. So those three states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and South Carolina, are partner states. So we're able to dive into the sub-county data. So sub-county just means we can get geographies like zip code or municipalities here, cities. So we see around that 40% to 45% range of households below the ALICE threshold. And then for Douglas County, Nebraska, that not being a partner state, we're just able to give here the county level data, not so specific to the city, but nonetheless still covering that, would cover that region. And here is now, so this is another map, and this map is colored by the percent below the ALICE threshold. So across Indiana, we see a big range of financial hardship. So throughout the whole state, 39% of households were below the ALICE threshold. 12% of those were in poverty, and 27% were above poverty, but not able to make ends meet. So that was 1 million households in 2021. And then the geographic variation just shows us that ALICE is much more affected in some areas than others. 24% of households were below the ALICE threshold in Hamilton County, Indiana, compared to the highest in the range is 55 in Scott County for the state. And I know that labor data is probably most interesting to your group. So this is the labor status for the region. Again, those 4 counties. This is data that's just on the website for partner states. So we can see how that labor status is broken down. What's the amount of hours that people work? How are people paid? And I like to concentrate, I guess, mostly on how many people are in a full-time salary position, because those are going to offer the most security for households. So about 23% of people above 16 are working in those probably safest, economically safest positions. And then we have fewer working in full-time hourly positions, and then there are salary positions that that may have more variance in people's schedules, which can be difficult for Alice. And then 3% of the population was unemployed, and then the yellow bars at the right representing people out of the labor force. And so nearly 20%, 19% were not in the labor force due to reasons such as sickness or inability to find work over a long period of time, and or other obligations apart from retirement. And we separate retirement here, which is about 17%, true for 17% of this population. And another stat we are able to look at is the quality of the jobs, and this is specific for the state of Indiana. So not the region, but the state. So in Indiana, out of top 20 jobs for the state, 70% of those are still paying less than $20 an hour. And so an analysis we have on the website also compares that $20 an hour to the household survival budget. So for Indiana, the example here to the right is a cook. There were more than 50,000 cooks in Indiana in 2021. The median wage increased by 17% from 2019 to 2021. It increased to $13.20 per hour. However, more than half of those cooks were still below the ALICE threshold. So even though there were those gains in a lot of ALICE positions over that period, the cross currents being that costs were also going up. So ALICE was having to pay a lot more for the basics, which I think Ashley will talk about soon in our ALICE Essentials Index. So are there any questions? I'm gonna next turn it over to Ashley, but I want to see if there are any questions.
Yeah, let's pause. I'm probably gonna share the website next. But yeah, just want to check in with folks. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so a couple different tools on our website. I'm going to share just a few slides, and I'm actually going to switch over and show you how to find some things. But I did want to point out that we have two really robust data sets, both ALICE in Focus and then our ALICE Economic Viability Dashboard, that are looking at the ALICE data in a little bit of a different way. So all of the data that we've shared so far in this presentation, we've been looking at household level data and some worker data, which is individuals. But for that kind of percent below the ALICE threshold, we're looking at that household as the economic unit. But with a different data set, also from the census, we're able to look at different groups of the individuals within those households. So we're able to take individuals and match them back to their household and see whether they're below the ALICE threshold. And then because we're looking at individuals, we can describe more characteristics about them, right? So if you're looking at a household, you can't say this household is working full time because there's multiple people. So one person might be working full time, another one might be part-time, someone else might be staying at home with the kids. This lets us kind of get more of those characteristics of the individuals that are living in financial hardship and present that in a different way. That data, the geography that we can do for that, there are these public use microdata areas. That's what you're seeing on your screen here, and I'll show you on the website. And they're groupings of approximately 100,000, no fewer than 100,000 individuals or individual population. And so in some places, those geographies are really small. So if you're in an area where there's a really dense population, like close to a city or in a city, those are going to be small areas. If you're in an area that's a little bit bigger, it's usually a combination of counties. So you can see here, for example, one of the PUMAs for your area is Warwick, Gibson, and Posey counties combined already. So you can see that, and then I'll show you some of the other things as well. But you can see below here too, Vanderburgh, I think county has its own PUMA as well. So I'll show you that. And that's what we're using for ALICE in Focus, which is looking at children, people with disabilities, and veterans are the three that we've done so far, where it's doing a deep dive into those groups. And then we also use this data set in our economic viability dashboard. And so I'll show you this on the site, but what this is looking at is kind of characteristics related to work, housing, and community for those people in households below the ALICE threshold, to get a better sense of the community and economic conditions that either help or hinder when it comes to financial hardship. So with that, I'm going to switch over to our website, and I'm going to show you how to find some of these key data points. So first, around the household data that Max had shared, all of that came from the Research Center for Indiana. So you can go to unitedforalice.org/Indiana, and you can you can look at individual counties or groups of counties. And I want to point out just all these tabs here, when you're in the Indiana Research Center, are going to be populated with Indiana data at the state, county, and sub-county levels. So for example, I'll take you with the county reports. This is the place where you want to go if you want to go county by county. So say you want to dig in deep to one particular location, you could do that here. Let's just get, always scroll. Okay, let's get Posey. With a county selected, this page is going to give you all of the county level data that we have available for this household level data. So it's a great place to kind of get a sense of, the grand scope of things in terms of financial hardship, in terms of race and ethnicity, household type and age. So all of those variables that Max was sharing, you can find those here for an individual county. And the reason I wanted to share this one too is because you can export this page and you have a report on all the data we have for that particular county. A lot of the other tabs also let you combine counties. This is how we got those regional combinations that Max was showing. So for example, on the household budgets page, on the demographics page, on the labor force page, you can use the county drop downs to create combinations of counties. So for example, this budget here, it defaults to the state level, but as you start putting in your counties, just gonna grab a few. You see how that will repopulate, and you can see that average across those counties in the table. This is where you can also find that budget calculator. Max mentioned this, where you can, for any of our partner states, you can look at, and if you select a county, you can look at many different household types and sizes. I'm just gonna pick a random one here, but if you look here under this family type, you can see all of the different combinations that are available. So if you have something specific you're looking for in terms of that composition, that's the place to find it. And you can also see below our household stability budget, which is looking at a slightly more increased budget that includes a savings category and a little bit more padding within those different budget areas. The demographics page also lets you create combinations of counties. That's a great one to check out to create a region and look at some of the demographics that Max shared. You can also use the maps page if you want to explore some more of that different geographies that are available. So for example, here you can look at, I'll point out these sub-county geographies where you can look at zip code, you can look at sub-county, you can look at census designated places. And then with whatever layer you have selected, here we're looking at zip codes for all households, but you could also do breakdowns by age. You can also layer on resources like healthcare facilities, you have banks, dental care, and you can interact with the maps and click and hover over to find out what the different resources are and what the ALICE data is saying for that particular geography. So that's another great way to engage with the data. I also want to point out, so yeah, more tabs here. I don't have time to go into everything, but the best way, honestly, is to play around with it. But I want to show you a little bit about the economic viability dashboard. And I also want to point out that we have a legislative district tool if that's of interest to anyone in this group. But our economic viability dashboard is our latest tool, and I think probably the most applicable to your work. other than kind of just understanding Alice. This is where we're kind of then looking further at the kind of the why so many households are struggling with new variables on work, housing, and community, as well as gaps. Because we know that in some communities you might have really great jobs, but the housing is so expensive that no one can afford to live there. Or you have great housing and community supports, but the jobs just aren't paying enough. People aren't wanting to stay or leaving community for better job opportunity. And so this really is looking at where those gaps are and where those strengths are, place by place. And so that includes data on work, housing, community, as I mentioned. I'm going to show you here a little bit so you can see what those PUMAs look like. I'll refresh it so that it goes a little faster. Here we go. This is available, you can see for the whole country, or you can zoom into a state and then the PUMAs within those states. I have too many things open, it's going slow. But you can look at those key domains. And the main one that you see here on the map, that's looking at the percentage of full-time workers who earn enough to support the household survival budget for one adult and one school-age child. And so you can see that breakdown here. You can cover over your PUMAs here. So there's the one that's Warwick, Gibson, Posey, Vanderburgh. The good thing about this tool is also that we have this for all PUMAs in the whole country. So you can also look if you wanted to at the surrounding states in those different areas. And I can show you that as well, but you can see kind of that breakdown of where those are. You can also just use the map or the drop down to select just your area. So if you press Control and then click, you can get just that footprint. And then all of the data below is going to be representing that particular geography. Some of the other smaller groups will drop out. But you can see all of the other variables as well, including the most common industries for workers below the ALICE threshold, with the number of workers, their average hourly wage. And so that's really, I think, a helpful one to see for the region. You can look at work schedules in terms of full or part-time, the unemployment rate for those below the ALICE threshold, as well as characteristics related to those workers, and by age, educational attainment, commute time. And so these are kind of some of the main work indicators. But yeah, we have data related to housing as well. I don't have time to go into all of it, but I want to encourage you to explore. So this is a great place to come and start looking at that. So for example, here with housing, we have the percent below the ALICE threshold paying less than or equal to 30% of their income on rent. And you can see that kind of breakdown by race, ethnicity. You can look at home ownership as well. So there's variables for housing, and I'm going to actually skip community real quick just to look at the gaps, because this is another place where you can see your average scores for the different the different domains related to the economic viability dashboard. So it looks like for Warwick, Gibson, Posey, pretty average when it comes to compared to the national median around your scores for housing, community, and work. And so there's a lot of, you can explore what that means. And you can also see how it stacks up to other locations within the state. And as I mentioned, this data is available for every state in the US, this particular data set. So it's a really great place to be making those comparisons, again, to your aspirational cities, counties. And so, I just encourage you to check it out, to see what you find. We're kind of in the soft launch period of this right now, meaning we haven't made a big public splash about it, but we're sharing it with our partners and are open to feedback at this point too. So if you do explore it and have questions or notes for us, please feel free to reach out and share that as well. So I want to save some time here at the end just to answer questions. Oh, let me show you Alice in action. Sorry. I was like, I'm done. And I'm never done. There's always something else to go. We got a lot of stuff. But we also have our Alice in Action database, because generally the question we get from folks, once they know the data and they're familiar with it, it's, what do we do? How do we make a difference for Alice? What does that mean? And so the Alice in Action database is where you can find the actions that our partners have taken specifically using the Alice data. So kind of the criteria for inclusion on this page is that they're using Alice data in their work and addressing the Alice population. But you can see examples here of what folks are doing. You can look at it by topic. And this is also, a great place to get ideas and to see what others are doing in those best practices. We also have, let me go back to the EVD. Speaking of best practices, we also have, as part of the economic viability dashboard, an action planner. and a comparison tool that might be of interest. But with the action planner, it takes those kind of variables and it gives the numbers behind them, but it also, we have this really great section around promising practices and work. So let me show you what this looks to. And you can do combinations here as well, but if you want to look at those total numbers behind the percentages on the other parts of the dashboard, this is where you can find that information kind of paired with strategies. So promoting job opportunities, promoting solutions for people who want to enter the labor force, addressing racial and ethnic gaps in employment and unemployment. But then here we also have those promising practices. So this is where you can look at some of the things that we've seen. We're not endorsing one specific strategy. We think local stakeholders are best, situated to make those decisions. But if you're looking for inspiration, ideas to get you started or to continue your work or further your work, this is a great place to do that. And there's these same promising practices section for work, housing, and community. So you can look and see what those, those strategies are and what they look like in your community, and if they might be particularly helpful for addressing the needs of Alice. And then, sorry, the last thing I'll show is the comparison tool feature too, because I know you do a lot of comparisons to your aspirational either cities or areas. So this is the place where I think would probably be the easiest to do that. We select 2 different geographies, and then you can compare them side by side. It's being a little slow, so I won't demo it right now. You can do that combination of any down to the same level. So you can this will also help you see where you can where PUMAs and counties don't always overlap, but you can zoom in, and then when you scroll down with your location selected, you can compare them side by side in these charts to make it a little bit easier to make those comparisons as well. Okay, now I'll actually really stop. So questions, thoughts, ideas? Great. I'll stop there. I don't think I have quite enough time to get into Alice at Work, but I do want to hint at this as something that we're working at the national level, and then piloting in some of our partner states, and are hoping to roll out more widely in the network. This is a specific strategy around engaging employers and how to better serve their Alice workers, how to provide kind of look at those best practices related to benefits and compensation and scheduling, professional development, work support, financial wellness. But it's actually working directly with employers to provide training and certification to kind of better address and make plans to over time support their Alice workers with some data support and some analysis from our national research team. So more to come on that, but did want to hint at that for this group as well. But I think with that, I'm going to turn it back to our hosts. Any questions or anything else? Can I do that? All right.
Awesome information, Ashley and Max. Thank you so very much. So we encourage people to get on the United for Alice website, play around with all of the different things that you can do with the data, different household compositions, lots of things on the economic viability dashboard. Again, they just put that up in the chat, unitedforalice.org. And we encourage other people to explore. And also, if you have any questions or have any challenges as you're working through this data, you can reach out to us at United Way of Southwestern Indiana, and we can certainly try to connect with the United for Alice team and get any of those questions or concerns addressed as well. But we're really looking forward to the Alice at Work potential offering, as well as employers kind of look to see what they can do to help their Alice workers and how we can support them. So that's a very exciting addition to the United for Alice program, and we appreciate all the effort that's gone into that. Does anyone else have any other questions that we can pose? I do also encourage you to take a look at the methodology document. I know sometimes whenever we are looking at those amounts, we're like, how did they get to that? And the methodology document really helps explain where some of those figures are coming from, if they're averages and those types of things. So take a peek at that as well if you have questions on what's behind the numbers. Well, Ashley and Max, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate all of this great information, and hopefully you'll see more traffic on that website.
Mhm.
And if we have other questions that come to us, we are happy to pass them along. But again, appreciate all the work that you put into such a great product.
Wonderful. Thanks
Yeah,
so much for the
thank you.
opportunity. It was a pleasure to connect with you today. And yeah, we look forward to staying in touch.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
it was. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you both. And just for everyone on the call, we are gonna be posting this on the Talent EVV portion of the webpage. We'll be sharing the recording and just some brief copy about what we shared today. Please feel free to push this out to your networks, your boards if you're with a nonprofit, other employers if you're a part of any other employer networks out there. Well, we want to make sure that this information is really broadly shared across our region, and that we have so much data and information really at the fingertips that we can kind of access. So again, thank you all for your time this afternoon, and just appreciate everyone logging on. So take care.
Have a great Wednesday.
All right, bye everyone.